It's now November, and although people may not think it, there's still quite a lot of things you can be sowing and growing from November right through till spring next year. And also the good thing about it is that anything that you're sowing and growing now is going to be very little maintenance because they're so hardy. They'll look after themselves. So we'll go through a list of things that you can be sowing and growing in November. So what I'm going to start off with is things like fruit, because this is a perfect time of year, as horrible as it is out there today, to start planting those. So you can plant things like plum trees and peach trees, and you can also plant blueberries, blackberries, black currants and gooseberries, and they're perfectly fine to put outside in a position where you want them for next year. Also, if you've been growing strawberries this year, you've probably had runners come off those strawberries. Even though they're very young plants, you can put those outside in a permanent position ready for next year, and they'll overwinter perfectly fine without any protection at all. But obviously, like anything that you're growing, if we're starting to get more crazy weather like -6 and below, then maybe pop a bit of fleece over the top of any young plants, just to offer them a little bit of protection. And the same applies to rhubarb. So if you've got some crowns that you want to get planted, you don't have to wait until next year. You can get those in now. So that's quite a lot of varieties of fruit that you can start now, ready to start harvesting in summer next year. So if you happen to see any little sales going off anywhere where things are getting reduced, maybe grab a few and get them into ground in a permanent position, or if you want to, put them in containers and leave them in your greenhouse. But just so you know, either way is perfectly fine. So you've got two options there. If you've been growing kale over the last few months, you're probably in a position now where that kale is ready to harvest. So you can start harvesting leaves from your kale plants now and encourage fresh growth, because kale will also overwinter. It's probably one of the hardiest brassicas out there. So take your harvest, don't let them leaves get too big. Take leaves as young leaves, get that fresh growth and try and keep that cycle going for as long as possible. And you've probably also got leeks growing. It's something I don't bother with, but you're probably in a position now where you've grown leeks to quite a good size, so you might need to check on those, because round about this time of year is when you should start harvesting them. And we know we've had a pretty rubbish year and they might be a little bit behind, but any time between now and December you should be getting a really good crop of those. If you've not already done it, you can plant some garlic, and once again you can plant garlic directly outside or in a container. We've got some going in a container, and I think I planted that about 2 weeks ago, and I'll show you how that's getting on. So this is that container that was set up quite recently, and as you can see, it's already coming through, which is brilliant. We did actually interplant some lettuce in there as well, but because it's so damp and I've left it on the floor as well, which is a big mistake, the slugs have had their way with that lettuce. But they've not touched that garlic, because there's not really anything that bothers with things like garlic and onions. So it's not too late for you to pop some of those in any time over the next few weeks, and they'll quite happily overwinter, ready for an harvest next year. So you can see that garlic is well on its way, and it's not only regular garlic, which is what they are. You could also plant elephant garlic. Again, it's something I don't plant, but maybe I'll try some this year. You never know. We do like to try as many different things on this channel as we possibly can. But even if I don't, we've already got some in a container on its way. But if you haven't got a greenhouse or a cold frame, you can just directly plant those outside. If you want lucky ones, unlike me, you'll have actually got some pumpkins this year, and maybe some squash. And you've probably already harvested that and you've been storing it. So depending on when you actually did harvest it, it's probably ready for you to start using now. Pumpkins aren't just for Halloween. There's plenty of recipes for pumpkin if you look it up. And if I'd have got some pumpkins this year, I'd have probably done one, but we looked out on that. But they should be mature enough now for for you to start using those up. But they will also store for quite a long time. Something else we've had no luck with this year is Brussels. But usually around about this time of year and all the way through December, you'll be able to start harvesting your Brussels. Ours got attacked by so many pests that they didn't stand a chance. But in different areas of the country, you've probably been a bit luckier. So it's time to start harvesting those Christmas Brussels. This is another one that you probably don't want to hear about, but you can still continue sowing salads. Things like your lettuce leaf, not your hearting lettuces. You want fast growing, cut and come again ones. So any type of lettuce leaf's perfect to do, and spinach as well. We've got spinach on the go, and I probably showed you that yesterday, but it's doing perfectly fine because it's more of a cold weather plant than it is a warm one. So we've got some spinach on the way. It's going to grow really slowly, but it will still keep growing. So you can try some regular spinach or perpetual spinach. But whenever you plant anything during November, make sure that you're selecting cold hardy versions, especially with this weather, because some plants are suitable for spring only and others for autumn. So just check your packets when you buy those, because there's certain things that you can sow now and leave all over winter. Because things like broad beans, you can still plant those in ground now. Just direct sow them into your raised beds and cover them up to keep those mice at bay. Or you can grow them in containers if you've got a dwarf variety. Just start them off in little pots because the root systems grow really quickly. So if you put them in a 9cm pot, you can probably get them to about 4 inches tall. And then at that size, they're perfect to plant outside. But on the other hand, if you've got a massive problem with slugs, it might be worth waiting and then sowing some of those in spring when it's a little bit drier. But that's up to you. If you want to start some now, you can do broad beans, but pick an hardy variety. Something like Aqua Dulce Claudia, if I've pronounced that right. That's a very hardy one for UK. You might also be thinking of growing onions over winter as well, and the best ones to choose for that are Japanese overwintering onions. And you can also get those in red onions as well as white, so they will come as sets rather than seed. So if you want to try some of those, once again, November is a perfect time to get your onion sets in, but you might want to throw a net over the top of those, because once those little green tops start poking up, the birds are going to think they're worms and they'll try and pull all those sets out before they've got a strong enough root system to stop them doing that. So just cover them until that root system gets established. And you can also do spring onions as well. Once again, there's different varieties of spring onion. Some are hardier than others, but there is varieties that you can get and you can plant directly outside. And what I tend to do is start them off in cells, and I'll put anywhere between 7 and 10 seeds per cell, so you get a bunch of spring onions. And once they've got to a few inches tall, they're ready to be planted outside. But as with everything else I've said, keep your eye on those temperatures, because the harsher it gets, the more chance there is that you're going to need to cover those with fleece to protect them. But spring onions can be sown from now right and through until spring next year. You can also do peas as well. But once again, make sure you pick an hardy variety. And a really good one, and a very hardy one, is Meteor. They will grow all the way through autumn and winter with no problem. And what you're better off doing with those is growing them and then harvesting pea shoots from them, because you're getting something back before you get the pea pods. And they'll get really established. And because you've been pinching the tops off, they'll be bigger, stronger plants, and then eventually you'll start and get pea pods off them. So if you've never thought about doing that before, and you can get hold of some Meteor pea seeds, try some of those. I don't really grow much in way of herbs, but there's lots and lots of herbs that you could be growing, but they need to be grown indoors really. They're not massively cold hardy plants. We've grown parsley this year. We've struggled with things like basil. But you can also put seeds in little pots and grow them on your kitchen windowsill, which is something we've done in the past. But it's a lot better if you've got a south facing window, so what little bit of sun we do get, they're going to be able to take advantage of that. otherwise you're going to end up with really leggy plants. But if you fancy trying some herbs, there's nothing to stop you doing that, but I would do that indoors only. If you've seen a few of those recent videos, you'll notice that we've been cutting back some pepper plants to overwinter, and they're already indoors now. We took away a lot of that foliage. We took off any flower buds or any tiny peppers that we're trying to grow, because there were some. And then you can overwinter your peppers if they're in containers. If they're in quite big containers, you can take them out, just rough that root system up and cut a bit of that root away, and then repot them into something smaller and maybe a little bit prettier. And then you can take your peppers indoors and overwinter them. Just bear in mind when you do that, you need to treat them as a perennial house plant. So you don't want to be watering them every day, only when they need water, because pepper plants don't mind drying out at all. And when they're ready to take some water, you'll see those leaves start to droop, just like your house plants. You can offer them a little bit of feed, but only do that once. Don't keep feeding them, because you're not trying to grow fruit. You're just trying to keep that pepper plant alive until next spring. And then you can take it back outdoors after hardening it off a little bit, and then repot it into something bigger, and you've already got fully established pepper plants, so you've got a jump on season straight away. So if you've been thinking about it, this is the time that you need to be doing that. Don't leave it much later, because the colder it gets, the more those plants are going to suffer, and they will start to die back. And that's why mine have all been cut back, all the old leaves removed. We've cleaned them up and we've took them indoors. Something for you to think about too. And going back to planting things directly outside, you can plant lamb's lettuce outside, because that is probably the cold hardiest lettuce that you can get. That will sit all through winter outside. Once again, we go back to slugs and snails. If you plant them in raised beds outside, it's a very damp time of year, so you probably struggle if you've already got problems with slugs and snails. So personally for me, if I'm going to grow that, which I am doing behind me, I like to do it in containers and raise it off at ground on benches, because that massively reduces the risk of your salads being eaten by slugs and snails. But the cold will not bother those plants, whichever way you decide to do it. And also Mizuna is another one, very cold hardy, along with mustard. So that's a few things that if you want to, you could plant outside, or in containers, on raised benches. So another one to think about. If you happen to live in an area where you get quite mild winters, then you could start some cauliflower off. You could still start it off from seed now and then put out established plants a bit later on, but only if you live in a mild part of the country. And although it's November, you will probably think there's not going to be much to do, but as you just heard, there is still quite a lot you can be doing if you choose to. And we know the weather has been rubbish this year, so now we're moving back to really cold hardy stuff. We've still got a chance at getting something that we can harvest over the next couple of months, or get ready for harvesting come spring next year, and hopefully 2024 is going to be a lot better year for growing than it has been in 2023. So that's basically everything covered. What you do from here on is your choice. But what I've also been doing over the last couple of weeks is creating a playlist on this channel. And I've selected every video that we've done concerning sowing and growing from January to October, and I've put them on this playlist in order. And then today I shall add November to it, and then December when we get round to doing that one. So anybody that's interested in having a look what they might want to sow in January and February, you're going to have that comprehensive list month by month for you to look at over the next couple of months to help you pick out what seeds you're going to need in preparation and prepare your garden ready for that. And it's a lot better doing it like that than just doing them and leaving them all together as they normally are. It's going to save you searching through looking for certain things, because we have got just over 700 videos on this channel at the moment. So if you want a reference covering sowing and growing from January to December, check out the playlist that we've just done and get yourselves ready for 2024. As always, thank you so much for being part of this channel. I really do appreciate it. And we've still got a few bits and bobs that we're going to be doing over the next couple of weeks. So if you want to see what they are, please hit that subscribe button, press that notifications bell, and I look forward to seeing you then. Take care.